discrimination, anti Semitism, picking on you or excluding you, and you shouldn't worry about it. It's an old story, but it's fresh. And I'm going to let David hit on this topic. Hi, my name's Stuart Brisgell. That's David Solomon. This is the Rant Network, unfiltered, uncensored conversation on a wide range of topics. This is a platform dedicated on giving an honest opinion of ideas and from a variety of perspectives. Join us as we dive into the latest news, pop culture, so much more rants about absurdity of modern life and deeper discussions like today affecting society. So sit back, relax. David, you ever been excluded because you're Jewish?
Absolutely.
Have you ever heard of a sports person been excluded because they're Jewish?
Absolutely.
Now, would it shock you to say that as a former national swimmer that I was excluded because I was Jewish?
No, nothing would surprise me anymore.
Would you be offended if I told you when I played North Shore football some of the nonsense that I heard even in the West Island?
And I can tell you the same thing about what my kids experienced playing on the ice in hockey or whatever sport that they were in. Absolutely.
You know, you would think with the acceptance of LBDQIA, which I probably left the letter out, well, you figure with the acceptance of all colors in the world and the understanding of what decimation of heritage and history would mean to everyone. But I think it's been extremely overlooked yet again. David, you want to talk about some sports teams? Some
No, I'm
people?
not looking to sports teams. I'm just looking to drive a message, ladies and gentlemen, today. And the message is as a Jew, as a proud Jew, Stuart, I think you would say the same thing for yourself. We can never be comfortable. We're not allowed to be because we're different. And I think that Stuart, I think that you and I both, having grown up together in this part of Montreal, and we've seen different kinds of things, we were always called the Jew,
Mhm.
even though we dress and look and generally act as any other normal human being. But we unfortunately are have to be excluded, and this has been generations of exclusions. And while we look back at the 1930s and we say, "Oh, we'll never be like that again," well, that's horse shit because we're back here again with a lot of the same, you know, malarkey. But here's the catch. Here's what's different. Okay. We finally have a voice, but we're not using it well. I'll give you a couple of examples. All right. And one of these examples has been, you know, you talked about sports. Now, Leah Goldstein is my age, Canadian cyclist. She's fantastic. She raced in the 3,000-mile race across America in 2021. She made history by winning the overall solo division. She was supposed to be the keynote speaker on International Women's Day next month in Ontario to talk about, the stress, the challenges of a woman and what have you. But they decided to cancel her because she was tied to the IDF. Her parents are Israeli. She served in the IDF. And once again, we exclude the Jew. Why? Because a group decided it was just inappropriate. It was a pressure. So again, a Jewish woman is told by international women, to hell with you. We see this, Stuart. We saw this with UN Women. We see this with the Me Too movement. And we've talked about this. How women's rights are women's rights except for Jews. That's one example. You have something else you wanted to add?
You know, David, it even exists in Hollywood.
Of course.
You got a very famous Marvel character, Gal Gadot. You know, she's been hazed because she's an Israeli. She's damn good looking too, but I never seem to be shocked. You know, earlier we talked about some members of parliament in Canada that are typically on one side, but today are being a very staunch supporter for Israel. They always have been, but I guess being more vocal today. In the United States, you know, it's amazing when you have more Christian organizations supporting Jewish organizations than you do Jewish organizations sometimes.
But I'm not even going down that road. It's the tolerance. It's the lack of intolerance that I'm amazed by. Your Congress, for example, passed passed a resolution 418 to 0, condemning Hamas of its violence, its sexual violence, its rape of the women, and only one person decided not to vote for it.
Let me guess who that is. Would
Yeah, go
that
ahead.
be would that be the member of the squad who's a proud member of a terrorist organization?
Yes, that would be
Oh,
Rashida Tlaib. And
you
what
know,
does she do
it's
on February?
amazing.
What does she do right after that? She accuses Israel of sexual violence against Palestinian children. Now, while you and I may disagree on, and I'll pull out Anthony Housefather's name, then Anthony may have been on the wrong party. And I would say to you, I agree with you, Stuart. I wish he wasn't on in the liberals, and I wish he would have listened to many of us way back when. But he's not, and he's fought against his own prime minister publicly. He was demoted by his prime minister publicly and in an embarrassing way. Um, he's excluded. We know that Trudeau panders no differently than Joe Biden to both sides. And yet here is a member of parliament with several other liberal members standing up to the prime minister saying it's wrong. Interestingly, it doesn't matter.
Nope.
They're outsiders. In the United States, the same members, the same Jewish members on the Democratic Party aren't calling out Joe Biden, aren't calling out Kamala Harris, aren't calling out any of these people who have literally flip-flopped because they're afraid of their own political careers. And yet I keep saying, Stuart, and I've said this to you and I've said this to many others, we as Jews can never be comfortable. We are not going to be part of the gang. We're not going to be Americans and Canadians. You know why? Because we're not allowed to be.
Well, the complacent Jewry, if you're not familiar with the term Jewry, that those are the Jews in Germany and Austria and the broader part of Western Europe that wanted to blend in. They weren't the typical identifiable,
Sure.
Jews with
Yep.
hats and
Yep.
teeth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
They didn't believe that they would be massacred by the people that they wanted to look like and they wanted to be like.
Right.
And David, there's a lot to be said about American Jewry, Canadian Jewry, or just Jewry as a whole in the Western world.
Well, we were promised freedom of religion.
With
we were
conditions.
Promised. Hold on.
With conditions.
With conditions, I understand. I'm like, listen, we're not here to say to everybody, you must. The opposite. We were supposed to be free to practice quietly. I'm not saying everybody's perfect, but what I'm saying is that here we are, many Jews, and I it's like I get it. There are Jews who stand out physically. They want to exclude themselves from society. I understand. Okay, and they're being ripped apart in New York, in Montreal, in England, in other places, because they're different in so many ways. But you and I, okay, we walk around, we don't scream and yell, we don't try to exclude ourselves. Yes, our holidays are different. Yes, we might eat differently, but that should have no impact on anybody's life. But then you have people like a Tucker Carlson who stands up and says, you can't be a good American if you support Israel. I mean, you can't be a good Canadian if you support Israel. What kind of, that kind of shit is what drives me crazy. It's like, Jew, you are never welcome because you're different. What is wrong? What happened to all this crap? You said by the way, it's LGBTQIA 2+, but all these groups talk about inclusivity, right? They all talk about it. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. Inclusivity. Even the smallest of groups will be included, except Jews.
I got
Jews
a
are not
question.
allowed.
I got a question. I actually asked you this question on Sunday. Can you say that acronym one more time? Because I'm going to forget letters or type it in
Forget
that
the acronym. What do you want to say?
How many chapters are there in Saudi Arabia, Iran,
Oh, listen, Stuart. But again, it's
Indonesia?
irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
Oh,
It,
it's not, because you know what? These groups also, for the most part, composed of multicultural countries and people, have the same vitriol hatred. And I
well,
don't
this,
get it. I don't get it. You
listen.
know, uh,
The thing is that if
you
if
have
America,
neo Nazis marching in Nashville.
you know what, Stuart? Here's the crazy thing, and this is not just for me. Even Martin Luther King had said it.
Hmm.
If you stay quiet, and I'm paraphrasing. If you stay quiet, then you're guilty. And those who are just not standing out and stomping out this hate, those that continue to let governments run amok without being challenged. I mean, I'm sorry, you could vilify the living crap out of Donald Trump on MSNBC and CNN because that's the sport and whatever. But when Rashida Tlaib makes false accusation after false accusation, and there is no condemnation, not by media, not by the Democratic Party, not by many other people, then that tells me a hell of a lot. That you are willing to say that Jew, you're not welcome.
You know what?
Jew, you can't be part of our community.
Do you know part of the problem with a free society
Okay, what?
is that you have the right to say everything you want to say, so long as the conditions are it's not causing harm to someone else.
Well, that's a
And,
lie. That's
well,
a lie.
I know it's a
Because
lot.
you can't yell fire in a movie theater,
Yeah, but
but you
that's
can
causing harm. Yeah, but that
but you,
causes harm. Yeah, that
right,
rule
but
is
you can
dictated off causing
falsely
harm.
but you can falsely accuse a group of people, and then you can create harm indirectly, as we've seen on university campuses, as we've seen in traffic in other places. They're causing harm, but there are no repercussions. They are permitted to do what they want. They are protesters, and I say they because there's a group of them, whether they're on the left, pro Hamas terrorist supporters, you name it. All these groups that hate Jews are given a platform, are given the opportunity to spew, whether it's in social media, traditional media, by politicians, you name it. They're allowed to say what you want. But Stuart, there's a member of the provincial parliament in British Columbia, a Jewish MPP, as they call it in BC, had to resign. Why? Because she offended Arabs, because she said that the land in Palestine pre 1948 was crappy. She had to resign because she offended people. But it's okay for somebody else to say and do what they want. I will repeat my words again. Jew, you are not welcome. And that is the problem, Stuart. You and I and our friends and our family aren't welcome here. It's convenient. We provide jobs, we add to the economy, there are Nobel Prize winners, we are a plus to any society we go to. And yet we are vilified.
David,
Unbelievable
David,
how nothing has changed in
no, no.
generations.
What's happened is the ability to whitewash history. If you are Coco Chanel,
Hmm.
you have whitewashed history, and that is exactly what has gone on. We have forgotten very quickly, which is the premise of the Holocaust, reminders that we shall never forget. David, thank you for today's episode. Last words, because I'm wrapping this up.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will say it again. We cannot stay quiet anymore. The noise has to be loud and clear because they're going to win. If we as a Jewish society, or even if you're not even if you're Jewish, if you like to see hate promulgate, stay quiet. But you are allowing what happened in Germany and what happened in Europe and even in the United States and Canada in the 1930s. You're going to create a society of hate, and it ain't going to stop with the Jew.
On that note, guys, thanks for today's episode, for tuning in for another session of David and Stuart talking about the Ret Network. Please join us, follow us, PM us for another thought-provoking conversation every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, noon Eastern. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us. We need our followers, guys. YouTube, Facebook, or whatever podcast. David, time to